Hapaday, hello to our viewers in Guam, the CNMI, and across the globe. We're grateful to be joined today by Rose Cuison-Villazor, who's the current Vice Dean, the Professor of Law and Chancellor's Social Justice Scholar at Rutgers Law. Professor Villazor recently made lots of news that resonated throughout the Marianas. I wanted to congratulate you at the very beginning for becoming the first Asian American woman co-dean at Rutgers Law in Newark and the first Filipina American law dean in the United States. And of course, as we were discussing, it was an interim position. And Professor Villazor, congratulations. How are you feeling amid this such great news?
Oh, thank you, Thomas. Half a day, everybody. I am so excited to be serving in this role. There are a lot of exciting things happening in the next academic year. We're going to be back in person on campus, in our classrooms. I'm looking forward to seeing my students and my colleagues in the hallways and in the classrooms. There are a lot of other programs that we're going to be launching at Rutgers Law School, including a hybrid program that allows part-time students to study law in person, part of the time in person and other part off-site remotely. I think this past year with us being in remote learning for a year and a half has taught us a lot about effective ways of teaching. And so I'm excited to be part of the leadership team that will roll that out. And really, it's just such a wonderful opportunity to be to represent Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in this role, because it's critical that we are visible in front of lawyers, of judges, and aspiring law students, and of course law students. So I'm grateful to have been chosen to be in this role.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about your roots in the Marianas because, of course, you now have a long professional legal career. But for those who might not know you as well, can you explain to us what your roots are in the Marianas? And you were raised on Saipan.
Yes. So I was born in the Philippines, and then when I was 10 years old, we moved to Saipan. I grew up in Susupi, which is near Mount Carmel High School, and that's where I went to school and graduated in 1991. I have gone back to Saipan since college many times. In particular, I taught at Mount Carmel High School after college. And then I also went back and worked for Micronesian Legal Services. And then since I became a law professor, I would go back every few years to be part of the pre-law program that encourages people from the CNMI and other parts of Micronesia to go into law school. And I'm still available for those who are interested in going to law school. Feel free to email me because I'm committed to making sure that people from our part of the world have access to legal education.
And so what keeps you involved with work at home? Obviously, you're very passionate and want to uplift the voices at home. You recently mentioned that you testified in the Guam legislature. You also testified at the Congress level with Congressman Sablan chairing one of the committees there. Can you talk to us about your involvement in those respects and what keeps you in touch?
I think it's both personal and also from a professional scholarly level. Those are my inspiration for the work that I do. I research and write in immigration law and citizenship and property rights. As an immigrant myself and a naturalized citizen, I personally went through that process. Having grown up in the CNMI, in Saipan, I know I've learned firsthand the struggles of what it means to be an immigrant in a small community. And then I moved to the States to go to college and to be closer to my family. And so being an immigrant and then becoming a US citizen has given me the personal experience that I draw upon when I think about congressional laws and state and local laws that affect immigrants and their families. So a lot of my work has focused on the rights of immigrants and how we can make our country much more welcoming of people who are coming to this country, who want to belong, who want to become Americans. And then on a professional level, I've always been interested in how laws have shaped what it means to belong. And certainly from the Pacific Islander perspective, that focusing on that, is really interesting to me because, as you know, Thomas, I mean, we're, having grown up in the CNMI, we've experienced what it's like to be US citizens, and yet we're outsiders in some ways because laws impact the US territories differently. And so as a law professor, I've devoted a lot of my time thinking about how laws affected the ways that US territorial residents and peoples have been treated by Congress, by the United States. And so through that scholarly inquiry, I've researched and written about the insular cases. I have gone back to Saipan and I've given lectures on why this is, on the history of the insular cases and how that impacts laws in the CNMI, such as Article 12 of the CNMI Constitution. And so both these issues, in particular with the insular cases, the relevance of those cases are critical right now, in particular in Guam and in Puerto Rico and other places, other US territories. And so that's why there was that hearing in the Guam legislature in early May. And I was fortunate enough to have been invited by Vice Speaker Munya Barnes to provide testimony. And then I also was able to testify before the Resources Committee in the U.S. House of Representatives before Congressman Sablan. Hopefully, the testimony that I provided to give an overall perspective of the insular cases and the specific impact it'll have on the CNMI is useful for all the legislators who are thinking about these issues.
Thank you so much for explaining all of your work. I wanted to ask about your career trajectory and whatever timeline you'd like to tell us in. Where did you start and how did you end up as, in this new coding position?
Oh, so we'll start from high school. So graduated in 1991 from Mount Carmel High School and then went to college. I graduated from UT Austin, go Horns. And then I, as I mentioned, I went back to Saipan and I taught at Mount Carmel. And I knew when I was I knew at a young age that I wanted to go to law school. Even in Saipan, there were some lawyers who served as inspiration to me. And so I then chose to go to law school. I went to American in Washington, D.C. And then while I was there, I had a professor who who mentored me and encouraged me to think about going into law school. She said, you were a teacher before. Why don't you have you considered being in front of, start becoming a law professor? And it's not something that I really thought about. Most of my professors were white and they were supportive, but I didn't picture myself as a law professor because they didn't look like me. But this particular professor encouraged me to think about it. And so I practiced law for 4 years, but even when I was practicing as a civil rights lawyer, I've already thought about the steps I needed to take. And with her guidance and the guidance of other former law professors, I went to Columbia Law School and I got a master's of law on a full ride through a fellowship program there. And after that, after 2 years at Columbia, I was then able to get my first appointment as a law professor on a tenure track at SMU Law School in Dallas, which was nice for me because that's where my family resides. That's where my mom and my brothers at the time, that's where they were living. But my husband and my heart brought me back to New York. And so since my first appointment as a law professor at SMU, I've gone through different schools in order to address some of my scholarly and personal interests. I am now here at Rutgers Law School. I've been here for 3 years. Prior to here, I've also taught at Columbia and Hofstra, and most recently prior to Rutgers is UC Davis in California, where I was fortunate enough to have spent some time with you while and some of your other relatives who, and at least one of them had gone to UC Davis Law School. And so through all of the different, through this timeline that I've shared with you, one thing that that has been really helpful to me is to have mentors along the way. There were others who came before me and they gave me guidance and encouraged me to pursue different leadership opportunities, to participate in committees, to be able to be part of a larger community, and also they've encouraged me to give back, and I have. I think it's something that I'm committed to making sure that legal education, there are no barriers to legal education, that there is a process and access for people who are marginalized and would like to become lawyers. I want to be there for them because that's what happened to me. I knew I wanted to go to law school when I was a little girl in Saipan, but I didn't know how to get there. But thankfully, I had people that helped me out.
Thank you so much for sharing that all with us. You've definitely been most places more than most. And I wanted to ask you, what has been some of the challenges that you faced? I think when, this tweet and all the news spreading on social media came out, it is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. People lauding your new position as the first Asian American woman co-dean, also the first Filipina American law dean in the United States. When you hear all of that, what were some of the challenges that you experienced going throughout your career that you just outlined for us?
I think it's there's a big responsibility of being the first and making sure that I'm not the last. And so in terms of challenges, there are not even a lot of Filipina American law professors. There also aren't as many Asian American law professors or Pacific Islander law professors. There are more than 10,000 law professors in the country. I can count in two hands how many are AAP, not AAP, Pacific Islanders and or Filipino American law professors. There are many more Asian American law professors, but certainly not a big percentage of the 10,000 law professors in the United States. So part of the challenges that I've seen is to figure out who will be there to provide support so that I can make sure that I will make tenure. And then the challenge after that, making tenure, is how to continue to build communities so that we can provide help to all those who are coming in also. And so I see myself as the first, but not the last. I want to do whatever I can do, what I need to do to make sure that others who want to be in this role, in the administrative role, to have that opportunity, that I'm here. And so I hope to be as visible as possible so others can see that this is that I can inspire them in ways that others inspired me also.
And so you spoke about past challenges. What are some new challenges? What are some of the visions and goals that you hope to pursue in this new role?
A specific goal. I mean, we can talk about more the long-term future goals, but also much more specific goals, particularly in the next few months. It's because we are now returning to campus. Rutgers is the first university to require that for students to be back in person, they need to be vaccinated. A goal that I have for the law school is so for us to be welcoming, to welcome everybody back, to be as inclusive as possible, and be able to provide strong academic environment that where people feel safe but can also be challenged. And so that's my goal for next year. But certainly building upon that, I want to consider how we can ensure that legal education remains accessible to all. And while we're being an inclusive, accessible, and academically strong law school, I also want to ensure that we use this responsibility that we have as lawyers and lawyers to promote social justice. That is something that I care deeply about. I am one of my official titles here is I am a Chancellor Social Justice Scholar. I came here to Rutgers in order to help build on our legal scholarship on how law can find equity on various grounds of racial equity, gender equity, indigeneity equity. And so the law is not designed to be equitable. It's a work in progress. And my hope is that as a co-dean, that I can be part of broader changes within legal education to ensure accessibility while also promoting academic excellence.
And I also wanted to mention you're also a mom, right? And you have two children. Where do they play into this? And when you shared the news, how did they react? And do they understand? Do they understand what you're
Yes.
doing?
Yeah, they do. They definitely understand. They are two teenagers who are smart and independent, and they have been extremely supportive. As vice dean right now, I'm extremely busy, and then that workload is going to increase even more. But the family have been extremely understanding. My husband, my partner, is one of the most supportive family members that I have. I would not be able to do what I do without his support. And so the girls clearly understand the importance of this, and so it's nice to be able to share the joy of being appointed as a co-dean. And I hope that I'm modeling for them a future that they see for themselves. They don't have to be lawyers, even though both their parents are. But I want them to know that nothing that they can do, as long if they work hard and they have the support of others, and they can get to the place that they want to be.
I wanted to wrap up by asking you what your advice is to folks at home who might be aspiring lawyers, or just young people, or people looking to get somewhere else or advance in whatever they're doing, their personal dreams and visions. What's your message to them?
So and this message, I think, is relevant not only for those thinking about going to law, but also pursuing higher education. Like you, Thomas, you're in grad school, you're finishing up grad school, or you will be, so congratulations on that. It's As someone who grew up in a small island, I felt intimidated going to places that were unfamiliar to me. And so I found myself always having to take a deep breath to remind myself I belong, and I'm here because I worked hard, and I should be in this room. I should be part of this conversation. And whenever I had any self-doubt, I would always just try to shake my head and say, this is an important part of what it means to be a lawyer, what it means to represent. And so I encourage all of you who are thinking about going to law school or getting a PhD, being an advocate, being a community organizer, that there's nothing that you cannot do. You with the support of your family and your community, you can get to the place where you want to be.
All right, thank you so much, Professor Villazor. As Rutgers Law announced recently, the first Asian American woman co-dean at Rutgers Law in Newark, and the first Filipina American law dean in the United States, and of course, very proudly representing the Marianas. So thank you so much for your time, and wish you the best in your next journey.
Thank you so much. Take care.